Welcome everyone, and thank you all for muting your screens, but I really want you to feel free to unmute yourself and share and ask questions. So my name is Ellen Friedman. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I love having this conversation around physical health and the understanding of the teachings of Sydney Banks, also called the Three Principles. And this topic of seeing symptoms through new eyes came just in a casual conversation that Mick and I were having around our physical symptoms. And I was kind of out for a walk one day, and I was out for a walk one day, and I was just feeling a lot of heaviness and a lot of fatigue, and I heard, "Oh, I'm tired," and then that layered thought just started with, when is this going to go away? What does this mean? What am I going to be able to do to and I watched it. It was kind of like slow motion. I was watching it. And then all of a sudden, something caught my attention, and the fatigue was gone. I turned over the reins to you, Mick. Can you mute the new? Thank you. And I just I saw, wow, fatigue was so front and center. And then it was behind the scenes, and I was like, well, I'm sure I can go looking for it and find it if I want to. And then I had a whole new level of gratitude for not just fatigue, but other symptoms, like the wisdom of my body communicating with me. That's all that, the simplicity, that's all that's going on. My body's just communicating with me in this minute. And I'm having that experience. And, oh, well. And suddenly my experience of my symptoms just became so much more transient. So much more transient. I just saw them come and go. I saw times that I didn't like it. But I knew, there was something inside of me that knew that it was going to go, or the level of intensity would go. And I just kind of moved into more curiosity since then. Now, it's not like I haven't gotten caught up and been miserable in how I'm feeling at times. But even then, there's a little bit less misery. There's a little less intensity. There's a little less fear and worry and what does this mean? So that's kind of what inspired this conversation. And like I said, I'm just curious if anyone else has anything that they want to share around anything that they've seen with their symptoms. So in this context, we're talking about seeing a deeper knowing inside of us. So just feel free to unmute yourself, share. If you have a question or comment, or yeah, go ahead, Adrienne.
I enjoyed what you said. For me, in my language, how I interpreted what you said is that instead of identifying as I have this physical feeling and I don't like it, from your words, I heard I became aware that there is this physical feeling. And in that awareness, it becomes a little more impersonal. And in that awareness, it became a little less you and a little more, that's just what's happening. And once you impersonalize it, or once you become aware of it, then it's free to go. Then it can become transient because it doesn't belong to you anymore. I just really got that from what you were saying. Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I really love hearing your interpretation of it. And that's what's so beautiful about this understanding is when we have our own interpretation of it, something shifts inside of us. Because and I stop and think about like sharing my experience, like what's, duh, Ellen, if you look at the cactus, the fatigue is going to fall away a little bit. And I also have this awareness that, I can only convey so much with words, an experience that I had.
Right. And what I said is just a different way of languaging it. It's just the words that I said resonate with me, and the words that you said are the best way that you could find to explain what you're going through. Yeah. Both valid and yeah, it's good.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll say one more thing. I don't want to preempt anybody else, but when I was a kid, I was raised in Unity Church, for anybody who knows what that is. My dad went for quite a while, many, many years of his life. And I can remember him saying, if you hurt your arm, your awareness goes to that arm that's hurting. And that feels, of course, it goes to the arm that's hurting because it's hurting. But he said you'd be much better off in the healing process if you would focus on the other arm, the arm that's not hurting. And that, it didn't make, I heard him and I remembered it. So I guess I feel like it was profound to me at the time, but I didn't really understand it until I came to a greater understanding of the three principles of the ways of explaining that, what you focus on expands. And so when you shift your focus to the cactus or to not being the one with the arm that's hurt or whatever that's hurt, but being aware of it or becoming aware of what doesn't hurt, it shifts the whole perception of the issue as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you followed your inspiration to share that, because I love bringing in the science that I'm aware of around this. So we have a sensory map in our brain called the homunculus, and its representation is larger for the parts of our body that have larger representation. Like our hands have our hands are like this, and our mouth is, it's very large, and our eyes are very large, and our feet are very large, and our trunk is very small. It looks like a very distorted person, but it represents the sensation in our body. And so if we were to break an arm, and if it were to be casted, within 2 weeks' time, that sensory map shrinks. So without the sensation, the sensory map shrinks. With the sensation, the sensory map gets bigger. And as it gets bigger, there's a technical term we use called smudging. But it's not like smudging sage. It's actually it's actually smudging in that, like stretching and just getting distorted. And so there is the science behind chronic pain and persistent pain is that representation of the brain gets bigger and takes up more space, and then we feel it more. So thinking about all of your body, either another arm or, it makes an immediate difference to people. So thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else?
What I was hearing Adrian say, or the word that caught me, was about identification. And the thing for me about seeing through new eyes is that I shift identification with something that I assumed was, this is just how it is. So if I have a pain, which I had very severe pain for a few weeks, I was convinced, because of my identification with the pain, I was convinced that that's the only way to see it. I was convinced that and because of that, I make up all sorts of meaning. I make up that it's always going to be like this, or how am I ever going to live through this, or how can I continue living if it's going to be like this for the rest of my life, or whatever. But there's an identification with that being reality, if you like. And as you're saying about the sensory thing, when I don't identify with the map, I identify with something other, or identify with a different sense of myself. I'm no longer identified with the pain.
Yeah, Mick, I love what you're saying, and I really want to go into that other, what you're identifying with, because I think that's really key.
You want me to say more about that, or
Francis, yeah, or anyone, or all of us. Can you unmute yourself, Francis?
No, just before you go into that, the thing you come across a lot about, it is as it is, being with it, accepting it, whatever words you want to use, surrendering to it, all of that seems to be at odds with what you're saying.
Tell me more about your question.
I suppose what you're saying is by putting the attention elsewhere.
For me, not so much intentionally.
Okay.
Much intentionally as well, I think the word Adrian used was awareness, being more identified with the awareness than with the thing I'm being aware of. You see what I mean? So when I was in a lot of pain, the me that I thought I was completely pain. So I was pain, if you like. I was my body. I was
Your limitations.
I was my limitations. I was my symptoms. I was the sensory map that Ellen's talking about. It was very, that's who I was.
All consuming.
All consuming. I was consumed. Yeah.
Mm.
And somehow something shifted. Shifted enough for me to get a sense that is what I was doing. So that's where my experience was being created. It was being created as if the pain had power to give me experience. And in the, in Three Principles language, I was as if it was possible for the outside to create my identity. And as soon as I saw that I was as soon as there was more awareness, or some level of awareness was greater, I saw what I was doing and identified more with a more, all I could say would be a more inner me, a more me of something creating, something creating my own suffering. Not that the pain wasn't suffering, but that I didn't have to experience the pain as suffering. Does that?
Yeah,
it's very subtle, but it was very.
It is very subtle, and I think by actually saying, to accept this, to be with it, all of that is actually you, me, the separate self, putting that on it. It's me telling myself you need to accept.
Exactly. It's still.
So whereas,
yeah.
So I'm still in that separate thing of saying, oh, you have to accept her or something. Whereas the awareness is something different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was for me. It was moving from the kind of the busyness of trying to get out of it by any means, whether it was by, you must accept it, or you must do physical exercise, or you must do a specific stretch, or there was a shift towards there was a shift towards a very quiet place in me, not intentionally. And I'm not saying I did this.
Yeah.
I'm saying there was something that I saw how the whole thing was being created, and that it was a reminder that I am not all of that wild stuff that I'd been caught in for many weeks. I'd been caught in it. I'd been very depressed. I'd been very, very hopeless, as Ellen would know. My conversation with Ellen, and in the midst of that, there was a new identification. Or a re-identification with being okay with myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And as you say, it's so subtle. It's so subtle, yeah.
It's very subtle, but it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
It occurs to me that in our conversations over the past couple of weeks, Mick, like I had a knowing of your well-being. I had a knowing of the temporary nature of your symptoms, even if they persisted. And that when we're in it with ourselves, we just have that forgetting. And Frances, I'm so glad that you interjected, because I really want to, it would be so, we're kind of talking about temporary transient. And I really want to say that I see this is true whether or not our symptoms are chronic. And that when we have chronic, persistent, seemingly never-ending symptoms that have structural or diagnostic identification, it's so it's even, it's just as easy, or to get to be so caught up in our thinking about our experience.
Sure.
And I just know with people that with clients that I have currently and in the past, and that have chronic, never-ending symptoms, our ability to engage in life kind of comes and goes. But that is for everyone. About, some hours a day we're in bed sleeping, hopefully. Even if it's a short amount of sleep. And that we move in and out of different levels of engagement in life, and that I would say I used to push through symptoms and engage in life because that I was so identified with the doer in me. I was so identified with what got accomplished. And so now, from this understanding, engaging in life from knowing my essence, from knowing the real truth of who I am, then the symptoms just kind of move forward, from foreground to background, or from focus to back focus. And it might be so slight. It might be so slight. And I don't know, does anyone have that experience, that even with chronic persisting symptoms, there's this kind of coming and going of how we experience life, how we engage in life? And again, for those of you who may have joined after we began, if you want to just go to the chat box at the bottom of the screen and send a message in without your name, that's fine. Or if you want to unmute yourself from the bottom left corner of the screen and share, we all learn from each other.
Ellen, I'll just agree with you that it's my experience. I mean, I used to think that pain was constant. Hunger. If you're hungry, you're hungry and hungry and hungry and hungry and hungry. But upon closer inspection, pain comes and it goes. It's intermittent. And hunger comes and it roars its head and then it leaves.
Even without being fed.
Even without being fed, right? Even without being fed, amazingly. But the mind, the small mind, not universal divine mind, small mind says, oh, you must do something about this right now, because it's never going to end unless something happens. The hunger gets fed, or the pain gets Advilled, or whatever it is. It's not true.
Thank you. Frances, you're shaking your head, and if you have experiences that you'd like to share, I know that they would be helpful to others, because I'm kind of aware that there's a recent experience that that you and I haven't even explored together, but I don't know, when you share, it's really helpful. And please, no obligation. But
No, I was just resonating there with the coming and going in that, and the fact that people in general, all day, you're interacting with people and experience changes. It is sort of a back and forth. So for a certain amount of time, it's not as all-consuming, but that doesn't mean it goes. It just means it's just maybe the realization that it is coming and going is good. Yeah.
anyone else?
I mean, just to say something about the coming and going. I mean, generally, most days, I would say that my tinnitus in one ear is there the whole time, and my experience of it is very different throughout the day. So my experience of it, sometimes I don't hear it because my attention is elsewhere. And I can go for long periods of not hearing it because my attention's elsewhere, like looking at the cactus or whatever. And there are times when I am being present with it and kind of listening to it, and that can almost feel like a doing, or it can feel like, oh, I am it can also almost feel like I have an outcome of wanting the awareness to affect it, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then particularly when I had a big shift the other day about this thing that we were talking about, of seeing myself as not my symptoms, in that space of I really don't know what language to put on it, but other people's language might be being more identified with my true self, or that doesn't come naturally to me to refer to it that way, but it'll do. But in that space of being more identified with what I'll call me, I was paying attention to my tinnitus every now and again, because I was having such a different experience of any symptoms. And the one that is most constant is the tinnitus, or most stable, I would say, is the tinnitus. I was paying attention to it from that place of me, and what was different was that it was so clearly not me. It was just a noise. It was just an energy, like, you know, if there was someone doing some strimming outside, there would be the noise of the petrol motor. That's not me. It's just something happening outside. And so my experience of it, any meaning I make of the strimming, or any meaning I make of the tinnitus, is being generated from me. It's not, it doesn't have the power to do anything to me. And that became very clear, that, you know, the noise of the tinnitus is just, you know, I could, in some moments, I could even have, as Ellen was saying, I could even have gratitude for the new seeing, if you like, that these symptoms are helping me gain. Not because I want them, but because I have no doubt that as I go through this journey, if you like, of conversations with my symptoms, or conversations with other people about symptoms, these conversations, I have no doubt that something is shifting in terms of my awareness of what me means.
And we all want that when we're not in it. Yeah, and I really appreciate the distinction that you made, Mick, about like acceptance is more of the my language is like acceptance is more of the outcome of the understanding, because it's trying to accept my symptoms or trying to get them to do anything just puts like them in focus. It just enhances them. And it's so natural that when we're uncomfortable that we want to do something to get rid of them. So natural. And that's what's so just amazing and beautiful about this understanding, that the byproduct of understanding results in acceptance, results in a higher level of awareness as something that effortlessly occurred rather than something that I was going after. Kathy, I saw you nod your head. Is there anything you'd like to add, or no pressure? If you do, just push unmute in the bottom left. And like I said, no pressure.
So I've been listening to this. I've just recently started thinking about the 3 Ps in relationship to physical symptoms. I've done most of my learning about the relationship between the thought, feeling, type of thing. And but because of some difficulties that I've been having with my breathing and coughing, it made me also go, oh, well, that's this, that's the same. And so I'm listening to all of this, just trying to take all of it in, because it's pretty new to me. The three Ps are not as new, but the awareness of the physical symptoms and their relationship with the three Ps is more new to me. Well, even having physical symptoms is more new to me. So thinking about that in those terms is more new. So I'm just trying to take all this in. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the beginning of my exploration with this, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I've kind of saw physical symptoms or physical health as like a special category of understanding. And how I see it now is that like the principles just apply to, they're just a description for all of life happening. And like you said, you know, you saw the relationship between thoughts and feelings, and I see physical symptoms as another level of feeling. I'm experiencing, you know, breathing or coughing and it's just because it's the physical body, and because we can get so identified with it, we can just go on a wild ride where those symptoms actually get enhanced from, you know, especially breathing ones. Whoa, I got really tripped up a little over a year ago with breathing things, because it's like, you know, life or death. I mean, and shortness of, you know, focusing on breathing immediately can, you know, make you feel short of breath and make you feel anxious about your breathing. And when I was working as a physical therapist, I taught breathing exercises, and I did pulmonary rehab, and so many people, it just, their anxiety just went way up. And I was looking at it from an intellectual level of what breathing was. And then luckily, you know, thank goodness they told me, the ones that, you know, gratitude to the ones that told me that they were feeling more anxious when we were talking about breathing. And then thank goodness mine directed me in a new direction about how to teach breathing without focusing on breathing, and just allowing people to explore what happens by being breathed, or by watching an animal breathe, an animal, a pet, or a child, or a baby, you know, breathe, the effortlessness of that. Frances.
Well, now that you're talking about breathing, my diagnosis is that I have a growth which can impact my respiratory tract. So, and life or death is what I see all day. So I do recognize that when I do recognize getting anxious and getting these coughing fits, because there's high anxiety about this. I don't know what I want to say actually, except it's very relevant to me.
Can I share what I heard, Frances? I heard the focus on one part of your lungs. One, it doesn't even matter how big it is. One part of your lungs versus the massive lung tissue that's in your chest and in my chest and everyone else's. Like this hyper focus can be on breathing, but it also can be on like something as specific as, you know, an image of a mass in your lungs versus the entire entire lung tissue. And how many people have large parts of their lungs that they can't use, don't use. And in this moment, I'm also just really reminded of the source of breath and the source of life.
Dare I say, of which I'm not in charge? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great that in this moment you can remember, you know, what's in charge, who's in charge. And remember that we are always being breathed. I mean, I'm just, for all of us on the call, I'm sure our breathing has changed just by the conversation, right?
Okay.
Is that accurate? Does everyone experience it? You know? It's a sensitive, breath is a sensitive spot for all of us. And then when we have something even physically limiting there, we forget the rest. The essence of Francis underneath the breath. The soul of Francis that can never die. Yeah, someone in the room just naturally took an extra deep breath. So Kathy, thank you for bringing breath in the room. So we've got about 10 more minutes. And I'm open for any direction. Any questions, any reflections?
I just remembered something I wanted to
Please.
I wanted to say while you were talking, Francis. I've seen you. I mean, you've been on quite a few calls that I've been on, and you seem so relaxed today. You seem in a really lovely state. whatever, I don't know what's going on in your mind, but from my perspective, there's just a very beautiful restfulness.
I think there's something about being able to say what's happening, because before on other webinars I would have been, oh no, I can't tell anybody about this. This is not, I have to, you know, whereas suddenly I'm in a space where I can say this to all of you, and maybe it's not hiding anymore or something.
That's lovely. No, and I mean that reminds me of the feeling that I think the insights that I had through the after, you know, as a result of the pain that I was going through a couple of weeks ago. There's something along those lines that I've been having about just, you know, again coming back to the phrase being me, and just it being okay, you know, being okay to be in pain, or okay to be human, or okay to be whatever I've been going through. You know, there's a level which I feel more relaxed, or I feel more allowing of myself. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
I grabbed my missing copy of my missing link by Sid, because when Kathy mentions feelings, I was like, I wonder what Sid has to say about this. And just the first sentence on this chapter of feelings. Our feelings are the barometer of our thoughts. And so whether it's a physical symptom, an emotional symptom, it's just a barometer of our thinking in that moment. Just means we're thinking about our breath, we're thinking about our lungs, we're thinking about our baby toe, we're thinking about our low back, we're thinking about our shoulder. Just what it means. And how quickly we just layer on top of that. And then I thought I had to stop layering on top of it until I just realized, just seeing that I'm the layerer, I'm the one that's layering is enough to change it. Nothing to do, just the barometer. And Francis, it is like such a gift to witness your settling. I even noticed it before you shared. Your breathing even shifted. I can see to Ireland all the way from here. You're in Ireland, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so like when Sid said, you know, go live your life. So I've had some conversations with people who were there in the very, very early days. And, you know, you would say, you know, go live your life. It's like, yeah, even with symptoms, you know, how can we engage in life today? What does that look like for us individually, moment to moment? It doesn't have to be a big thing at all, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing. And we do it, I do it just to have the fullness and richness of my experience of life. But when I do it to get away from where I am, then I'm always measured up to, then I'm always comparing to in and out of the symptoms. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Yeah.
Sorry, just to go back over that again. You say, when you say living your life, you mean not forcing? Is that what you meant? Not, but just.
For sure, not forcing, whatever that means, whatever that means, like whatever the inspiration is to do in the next minute, with or without the symptoms. You know, it doesn't have to, it doesn't look like anything. It just looks like living life.
Yeah.
And there are infinite possibilities and ways. Infinite possibilities and infinite ways to do that. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to see if there's any final words from anyone, and thank you all for just giving me the gift of sharing what I see around physical health and this beautiful understanding. And
I'd like to just jump in and say thank you for facilitating this, because like I said, it wasn't all that long ago that it occurred to me, oh, if I'm doing this with my thoughts and feelings, maybe I should look at my breathing with this as well. And then when I saw your post that you were doing this conversation, it was like, oh, great. So thank you for this being here right at the moment that I needed it.
You're welcome. And I'm going to do it again next Sunday. Just like to do it on different days to catch people at work and people that don't work, and people that have various schedules. And what I know is that each conversation is unique and different in its own way. So thank you for joining, Kathy, and everyone else.
Thank you, Ellen.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Lots of love, and bye for now, and see you next time.